Hey Joe.
Yes, I'm here. Hello. How are you,
Yeah.
gentlemen?
Hello.
Joe,
My biggest apologies, guys.
it's all right. That's all right. I know that you're obviously proven to be a techno whiz as well. It's
Oh, very much.
late, late, and a techno whiz.
That's right.
Well, the latter forgives you
Thanks,
because
George.
I'm a dinosaur in that area. You see, I even have the dinosaur microphone. Look at that. It's
I love
huge.
it.
It's
Looks very
huge.
professional.
Professional. That's me with a capital P.
Love it. Love it. How you both going?
I'm well. I'm well. Do you like our new backing board? We
Oh, I love it. The Ozway Realty back.
That's correct. We want to hide the fact that we don't have any books in the background, so it doesn't make us look smart at all.
I just like to pretend that I read stuff. So it's been there for 10 years and
I
it's
just,
working
yeah,
well for me.
it looks suspiciously like the Wallara Library, but anyway, that's you're not there, are you?
Well, it could be. Who knows?
No, it's good to meet you, Barry actually has spoken very highly of you, and
Oh, that's nice.
I'm new to this game, Joe. So I understand that you work with real estate agents and in the real estate industry. That's one of your laneways, I presume.
Yeah, that's well said. It's one of the laneways. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
So when I started my coaching consulting business 14 and a bit years ago, the first 5 or 6 years was pretty much 80% of my group work was with residential real estate salespeople and leaders and principals. And I had one organisation, Jones Lang LaSalle, that was my only sort of multinational commercial real estate, industrial real estate client. And then since then, because my work in the realm of emotional fitness has expanded and deepened, I take that work across any industry, wherever people want to listen to, getting insights into how they generate their reality, how they create it.
So, Joe, when you go out to industry events or parties, and people say, "Hey, hi, what's your name? What do you do?" How do you respond?
Uh, Background in psychology and sociology, and I'm an expert in emotional fitness. That's essentially it. So, which means helping people navigate through the guaranteed uncertainties of life. So, it's basically, George, improving people's relationship with uncertainty and ambiguity, because most people don't know how to navigate through those waters. And clearly, 10, 12 weeks ago, we were experiencing an acute dose of uncertainty, and a lot of people were living like as if, this is all unconscious, but a lot of people were living like, what's all this uncertainty? It's like, well, hold on, it's always been there. It's just that perhaps you haven't noticed it as much because you haven't needed to. So how you handle it in the intensity of times, in acute doses, is exactly the same way as you handle it in a more, let's just say normal uncertainty, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does. It does, Joe. I mean, let's go back a little bit, mate. Let's go back to how it all began for you when you were fresh out of school, I suppose, or went on to university. Like, what was your bent back then?
Well, I was confused. So when I left school, I left high school to go to uni back in 1989. Basically, I just needed to get into uni. So I got into this will impress you, George. It's a Bachelor of Applied Chemistry, specialising in food science and technology. That's where my uni career began.
I could just tell
Could you
from
top
that
that, George?
title alone. Bachelor of Arts, majoring in economics. Sorry, I can't. I can't.
I thought
But
you were going to say to me, "Try this on, Joe. This is even more fancy."
Joe, I don't know how in the world before the internet you actually found that course.
I don't know either. I think it found me. But so
There would have been two dogs and a cat attending that one.
well, I tell you what, I actually met, out of all those two dogs and cats, I met my future best man, who introduced me to my wife. So
Wow.
it was meant
Wow.
to be for that. That's the purpose I give that year. So that year was, it was just, I was in uni, glad to be involved in tertiary education and all. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But what became obvious then is that I wanted to work with people, because I was working with things. And as I share a lot in my, sort of the framework of emotional fitness, one of the fundamentals of life is getting clear on some of the macro perspectives of life. And some of us are designed to work better with things, and some of
Yeah.
us are designed better to work with people. And I discovered in a very direct manner that I wasn't good at working with things. And literally, George, we were working on a weekly basis in RMIT in Swanston Street in a lab 2 levels below ground. It was a dungeon. It was awful. It was depressing, learning how to make chips and create food and understand the technology and the science behind it. It was just not me. So that I worked my butt off to get out of there, and I transferred into a place down here called Deakin University and majored in psychology and sociology, did a degree in that, and then went on to postgraduate studies in occupational health. I worked for 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that, as a rehabilitation counsellor at Ford Motor Company in Broadmeadows here, where they used to produce the Ford Falcon.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, I came up against an emotional wall, in the sense that I wasn't aware. I was very ignorant back. We're all different levels of ignorance. I'm still ignorant now, but back then, very innocent ignorant, meaning that when I was in that career, I wasn't aware of secondary and tertiary agendas and politics and shop stewards and what they meant and what they represent. So I was trying to help the guy who was injured on the shop floor, but I had 5 people to report to. I had the medical centre, the on-site insurance company, the area manager, the local line manager, and the shop steward. And all of them had their own agendas, and 80% of my caseload were malingerers. So I wasn't good at playing that game. I didn't know how to play that game, and it was depressing as all heck, actually. It was really difficult, awful.
I can imagine.
And, yeah, so people were saying to me, oh, you should be, glad that you found a job that's related to your degree and all this. But I couldn't stand it. So anyway, long and the short of it from there is a colleague of mine, a fellow rehab counsellor, had just sold his house and was extremely impressed with his agent, because he sold in the, I don't know, do you know Melbourne well, George? I don't know if you know Melbourne.
Fairly well.
Yeah. So we were in, he lived in a place called Ascot, in the eastern suburbs, somewhere past Mount Waverley. And they sold their house, and he wanted to move over to where I am, this side of town, Ascot Vale, Moonee Ponds. And the agent sold the house successfully, beautifully, came over to Ascot Vale and door knocked the streets and found him a house and relocated him. And anyway, the long and the short of it is that sparked my curiosity about this agent, about real estate.
Yep.
And the short transition story is that I got into real estate, residential real estate sales, and I worked there for 7 years. And for 5 of those years, absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. And then what happened was I was just doing the same old role, and my then employer, who I still have got a great relationship with, there was no opportunities for further growth, profit share, leadership. So there was none of those opportunities there. So I for the last 2 years, I floundered there a little bit, brought in enough money and all the rest of it. Took a year off on a sabbatical, which I didn't know what a sabbatical was back then. I needed to take a year off. I signed up for a diploma of teacher training in meditation, and did that for a year. Did all kinds of experiential residential retreats, silent retreats, vision quests. The most difficult thing I did that year, in fact, one of the most difficult things I've done in my life, was spending 72 hours straight sitting in a medicine wheel, which is just basically a circle of sticks and stones that couldn't be, the diameter couldn't be bigger than the height of my body, because I had to stay seated there for 72 hours with 10 litres of water and you couldn't have a phone, journal, books or anything. It's just you and the trees. And it was a journey into experiencing an altered state of consciousness. I was going through extremes, George, to find answers. It was crazy. And I got through it and changed my life.
I mean, on a practical level, Joe, how did you do your ablutions?
Well, you were allowed to exit your circle for those, George. So number one, you could sort of hang in there and have a bit of fun, and then you had to bring a shovel and take care of that externally. Just looking at the practical side of it. Yes.
So you found yourself whilst you were digging little holes.
Yes, well, I only had to dig one hole, because you see, you had to go through some kind of cleanse beforehand. You see, you had to to prepare for this vision quest. So it was 5 days all up, and 3 days doing that. There's a whole story around that. But,
sure.
So I did that, and went back after that 12-month sabbatical. My employer in the real estate space was open-armed and welcomed me back, and they were happy to have me back. But within a week or two, George, I knew I just didn't fit there anymore. I just didn't belong, and I left. In December 2005, I officially quit as an employee. I'd been an employee for 10 years. And in February '06, I started this coaching, training, consultancy business. And when I say I haven't looked back, I mean, certainly the first couple of years were challenging because I've never been 100% responsible for my own generation of income. So bringing in leads, establishing relationships, networking, etc., and getting going with that was hard. But I'm still around 14 years later, and I love it. I mean, it sounds cliche, it sounds platitudinal, but you know, I'm living the dream, and I don't mean that in a famous, rich, way. We're rich. Like the money's great. Silvana's my wife. We've been married for 24 years. We've got two 12-year-old twin boys, and we have a phenomenal life in terms of quality of time. Sometimes I miss appointments, as you gathered earlier, and
it's not a deal breaker. You don't have to travel anywhere, so you're fine.
It's so true. Yeah, so that's the fast sort of helicopter view of the last 20 years.
Yeah, look, it was it's quite a journey. But how was obviously living the dream is everyone's dream, I would imagine. I mean, have you found anyone that didn't want to live a dream?
Yeah, I won't say everyone because not everyone does, but people who want to live their dream, they don't realise that living your dream is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah,
like it really is. You have to go through. Guaranteed, you've got to traverse through many dark tunnels to burst through to the other side. And a lot of people, unfortunately, quit before they get to the end of that tunnel and try to reverse back. And one thing that I've learned from life is you can't go around life. You can't reverse through life. You have to go through life. You have to go through that tunnel. And look, I was tempted to quit many times. I was tempted by the fantastical safe haven of going back to a job that had a monthly, on the 13th of every month, I knew that this was coming in and etc. But I'm thankful that I was surrounded by good people who understood what I was wanting to create, and surrounded by good mentors and all that kind of thing. And that supported me on getting through those dark tunnels. And and I could tell you so many stories, which we haven't got time here for, but was worth going through all those situations. It's just getting through. It's just getting through those first 2 or 3 years, and your skill has to get to a certain level of expertise and engagement and all this. And once you know how to, in my space, in my field, once you know how to language people's problems that they couldn't language, as long as I can do that, I will have a job forever, because when I can put language to people's cloudy haze of what's wrong with me, why am I feeling depressed, why am I anxious, why are the things that used to excite me don't excite me anymore, why am I disengaging? Like, to have answers to all of that and have language around that is what I do. So, and then when you can language it, there's massive relief, George. And when people are relieved of understanding that, oh my Lord, what I'm experiencing is actually quite normal, and then from there progressing with the coaching, the training, the direction, it's deeply fulfilling.
Go, Barry.
I was just going to say, what I hear in that, Joe, is just adaptability. And in the last 3 or 4 months, I mean, in like all through life, things change and there's new circumstances. And what I heard as well when you were working at that real estate company for a certain number of years, and you sort of mastered that, and it became a bit boring for you, if you like, or just there was no challenges there. Again, it's you having to reinvent yourself and adapt and create a new environment, and you've done that for yourself, but now you also help other people recreate their environments and adapt to what's going on.
Yeah, well, as I was sharing with some of my listeners today, my latest podcast came out, the latest episode, which is called the actual episode itself is called The Wisdom of Quitting. The Wisdom of Quitting. And so in there, I just shared an insight where I just shared with people that when that vehicle of career or that vehicle of relationship or vehicle of business, that experience, when it's genuinely tapped out in terms of growth where you can't grow spiritually, emotionally anymore as a person, as a man, as a woman, you can't grow anymore, like genuinely there's nothing left there, then you know that it's time to move on. And but you've got to be really honest about that, you know. And so, because a lot of people quit their dreams or quit their business on fear. So, but we need to understand that the reason why you do what you do, Barry, and the reason why George does what he does, what I do, and what your listeners, you know, why they do what they do. You know, we could ask everyone listening into this, why do you do what you do? And we'd have, you know, for 20 people, we might have 18 different responses. But from a behavioral standpoint, we all do this for the same reason. And that reason is to grow. We consciously chose to do what we do for a living, but the unconscious driver is for us to grow. And for us to understand true growth, that the prerequisite, the core ingredient, the precursor, the doorway we need to walk through to grow is uncertainty. So uncertainty is the prerequisite to all growth. And when people make a decision to quit on their dreams because of uncertainty being so acute or so intense or too much, it's like, well, hold on, you didn't know this, but unconsciously you got into this for this moment. So you can work out who you are in this moment or who you need to become in this moment. And when people understand the psychology of that, that's emotional fitness. And now people are understanding, okay, well, uncertainty is part of life. If my mission is to get rid of uncertainty, good luck with that, dude, because you ain't gonna do that.
Never gonna happen.
Going looking for uncertainty. What I hear in that, Joe. I mean, if we're really wanting to, we all want to improve our lives somewhere, somehow, in whatever aspect that is, whether that's around our family, our business, you know, the clients or whatever it is. It's there's going to be a challenge there, and it's going looking for it. But our natural state is to avoid that sort of situation. We want to avoid anything that's painful and just focus on pleasure. But what you're saying is that it's actually through the pain that where the pleasure lies.
See, the pleasure is an interesting thing, Barry, because, you know, in that beautiful, massive, gorgeous book, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about obviously leading a meaningful life, and whatever that means for people, it means different things to different people. And one of the, I think, important insights he shares there, that a lot of people, if they're lacking meaning in their lives, they'll overcompensate with pleasure. They'll overcompensate with pleasure.
Correct.
And something that I share with clients all the time is that, you know, everything that's meaningful is pleasurable, but not everything that is pleasurable is meaningful.
Yeah.
So having that awareness makes you more privy, more advanced in the way that you focus and think around, okay, well, I'm doing this thing because it's pleasurable. Well, is it pleasurable and meaningful? Is this something that gives you meaning? So, and it can be anything. And we're not talking about saving the world. Like, you know, as you know, Barry, you've known me for a long time. Running is one of my things. I love running. I just love doing the whole thing, the marathons, the races, the stuff. That gives me meaning. It's a pleasure that gives me meaning. And doing my work is meaningfully pleasurable. But not everything that's pleasurable is meaningful. And sometimes what happens, sometimes it's very common that people's lives, especially in a beautiful country like Australia, where we live in one of the richest parts of the world, like by a mile, we are materialistically richer than we've ever been before. In fact, we are, by hundreds of folds, we are richer than queens and kings from 300 or 400 years ago, the way that we live. So we're living in this materialistically rich world where food, anything you want is a phone call away or a button away, all that. And yet anxiety and depression are at historical highs.
Yeah.
And that's because people they chase pleasure thinking that's the doorway to heaven, when all the pleasures in the world, unless they're connected to your values, they're going to be an overcompensation for meaning.
It's wonderful hearing that from you, Joe, because I've always considered that you know, in terms of evolution, we're hardwired to hunt for our supper, and we're hardwired to go through tough times and days of starvation to try and nail that animal and nail our next meal. And it seems like it always seemed to me that, you know, having a job never suited me either, because it was like marching on the spot and given your weekly dose of marching powder, and all it did was numb you. All I experienced was a numbing sensation of just numb throughout the week. I felt completely unfulfilled, and yet I was living for this marching powder that was dished out once a week, you know, and that's what life became. And it was empty. It became empty and meaningless. And ever since I've been on the hunt, when I realized that that's my bent, yeah, I've had my low points, but I've had some bloody great high points as well. My question to you is, how do you transition someone who's so drug dependent, so to speak, on their weekly dose of marching powder to become this lean, mean hunting machine that can go out there and become someone and feel fulfilled when they're so full of fear to begin with? How do you condition them?
Well, it's not about conditioning them. It's about them being ready. So what this means is, so what happens for all men and women, for all of us, we are all continually going through a values evolution on a personal level. Our values continue to evolve, and our values in my emotional fitness work, I define a value as our emotional compass. So what happens is there's two fundamental worlds. If we look at values from a macro level, there are two worlds. There's the ambition-driven world and there's the meaning-driven world. And most people are caught up in the ambition-driven world, which is a very much an egocentric existence. And so what happens is, for most of us, the way that we exit the ambition-driven world is we have to feel the squeeze. So one of my sayings in life is that, you know, if we don't squeeze life, life will squeeze us eventually. So you may as well, you know, go for it, you know. But for most of us, though, we've got to experience some kind of squeeze, some kind of pain, some kind of crisis, some kind of life-shifting, perspective-shifting experience, whether it's the birth of your first child or a divorce, or for me, it was a slow burn, because it was like, I realized in my last 2 years of my 7 years in real estate that the things that were exciting me, the next car, the house, and that, just didn't engage me anymore. And I was actually concerned. I was worried that, is this what depression looks like? Is this what mental health issues or emotional health issues, is this what this means? Is this what I'm going through? And what it was, you see, you got the vehicle of work, that's the one that you were talking about, George, I like your metaphor, the marching powder, is that what you said?
Or marching on the spot, looking out for the marching powder once a week.
Yes. So there was a time when that was good for you. There was a time when that was new and exciting and all the rest of it. And that stands for a certain set of values. So that particular vehicle, that particular career path, the values are what they are. But as we evolve and move away from those values, if we're still doing this, but we've moved over here, that emotional gap, we're going to feel that in pain. And a lot of people experience that through anxiety and depression. What's actually happening there is we're evolving into the meaning-driven world where we need to redefine ourselves. And in a lot of cases, it's a career shift. It's a career change. For some people it's a geographical change. For some people, it's a relationship shift. It's some kind of change, because whatever these vehicles are you have here, if they're not values aligned with you and you've moved on, you've got to now find something new. Now, this whole move is organic. It is natural. It's not, we don't sit down, George and Barry, we don't sit down and go, I'm actually now ready for the meaning-driven world. I'm about to evolve into my next level of consciousness. It doesn't happen like that. No. It happens organically. And life has its ways of saying, hey, George, something's changed. Have you noticed that the way that you see things is just not the same anymore? You know, that thing that you used to do, that you used to love doing, it's not for you anymore. You know, it's like you just don't engage with it anymore. So we start searching for answers.
It's a bit like over this last 3 or 4 months with this COVID situation, Joe. I think there's been a lot of people have been discovering a whole lot of new things that have just been coming up for us. And one thing I've noticed a lot of is a lot of compassion and the community connecting a lot more. I know there's a bit of division going out there, but there's also a lot of a rising of compassion and love coming through.
The world on a macro level is going through this evolution from ambition to meaning. And it's well said, Barry. And so, you know, on behalf of one of my clients, for them, I have trained over 6,000 coaches who are doing this transition. So this is a transition that I know thoroughly, inside out, upside down. And it's a scary transition for most people. So there's no conditioning as such to be done, George. What it is that when you feel that in your soul, in your heart, in your emotions, if your values compass has moved to a different direction, which it does, then we need to wake up to that and go, okay, if you are aware of these two worlds, the egocentricity of ambition and the heartfelt area of meaning, this is where you can make wiser decisions and go, okay, what can I do for a living that has got meaning for me? But what the problem is, and this is the hard part, for most people, which is why they fold, is that you evolve into the meaning-driven world, but you can't stay there if you're not making money. You can't stay there if you're not making money. What you need to do is you have to integrate the ambition-driven world into the meaning-driven world. So the way that you earn money now is meaningful to you, that is aligned to who you are now. So that's the journey, and that journey is bloody hard.
That's where pain comes in for people, right, Joe? Like they're going, they want to be in this world of having meaning and also deriving their income, but they've been used to deriving their income, as George said, doing the march for the marching powder, and now they've actually got to generate in this whole new way, and that's going to create pain because there's a disconnect. You can't go to the local supermarket and say, hey, I've got meaning in my life, can I get the groceries? I mean, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to be really clear here is that anyone who's going through this transition doesn't mean they have to change jobs. What's changing is their psychology, the way they do their job. So in my case was changing direction and jobs and career path, etc., which is quite common in this kind of realm. But for a lot of people, it's not that. What we do is when we're in the meaning-driven world, we finally discover and wake up to the behavioral fact that our purpose in life will only ever be found in service to others.
Yeah.
That's when we really wake up. And that's where we go back to that job. And if that job's got the capacity, well, we can be a server to humanity, not to the detriment of self, but to the service of self through others. If you can do that in that career that you were disengaged with, then rock on, fantastic, if you can. In my case, I just couldn't do it because there was genuinely no more growth to be had, and it was just a different world.
Well, we see that a lot in the real estate industry, Joe. A lot of agents I see going from brand to brand to brand or office to office to office, seeking what I believe is meaning, yet they find the environments are very similar. The brands might look different and the colors are different, but ultimately there's the environment is one piece, and then there's them. It's who they're taking with them wherever they go, and then what they're seeking. So is there merit in actually changing the environment? So it's not necessarily a matter of changing the profession, but is it sometimes a matter of changing the environment? But also I see a big part of what you're saying there is to look at, each individual, to look at adapting and discovering who they really are and how they can derive that meaning in their work.
Wherever you go, there you are. So a lot of people do a cosmetic changeover and don't realize that by changing colors, they're not going to change themselves. So, and for some people, unfortunately, they have to go through 5, 6, 7 different jobs to wake up to themselves that it's not the job, it's them. And it's always been us. It's always been us. It's always been you,
Joe,
for you, me for me.
You help people to shift their perspective. Is that correct, Joe?
Yeah, I guess you could say, George, I'm a perception shifter.
Yeah. Well, it's Viktor Frankl was a prisoner in a prisoner of war camp, being cut open by Nazi doctors without anesthetic, and yet he felt freer than the guards. So how's that for a shift in perspective?
Amazing.
That's amazing, right?
And the reason why he got through that, this is not simplifying. It is amazing, George. This is not simplifying Viktor Frankl's situation at all. But the difference between him and the rest of the people who died was that there was meaning. He created meaning in that experience. Oh, how do you create meaning from someone cutting you open, someone doing that? It's not the meaning from the experience as such. His meaning was, if I can make it through these extremes, I have got a message to share with the world.
Yeah.
And that created logos therapy, which became a meaning-driven, humanistic, psychological basis of creating change for people. So he did it for others. So psychologically, even though his environment sucked, to put it really, really nicely, his psychology had shifted. And so, because you could put any of the other prisoners, war prisoners, into even lesser dangerous situations. And if their psychology is, I'm a victim, well, they're going to die over there, even if it's safer. Whereas you put this guy through any situation, it's like his psychology is, no, I got to get through this, because if I can get through this and I can teach people how I got through this, I can help so many people with so many problems, because how many others are in this extremity? So I can help them. I can help them.
But he's being of service.
Yeah,
being of service, and what he was after was bigger than him.
exactly. And that's a
Yeah.
meaning-driven existence.
Yeah. So again, Joe, look, the real estate industry is, I'm mostly an outsider, but an outsider looking in, the real estate industry is plagued with symbols of an ego-driven existence. And, it does, I mean, it has in many ways contributed to the overall perception that people have of real estate agents. You know, it's how have you been, how do you find your clients? How would you, at which point do they wake up and say, hey, I've got to call Joe? How do they do that, Joe?
Well, a lot of the real estate clients, my first real estate client was because I had a personal one-on-one coaching client who I was helping with his marriage, and he happened to be a real estate agent.
No
And then
surprises
I had
there.
no intention of working with agents, George. So what happened was I was working with him, lovely fellow, still in touch with him through LinkedIn and all this kind of thing, from 14 years ago, from he was one of my first clients. He then said to me, I've got this friend of mine who owns 2 Ray White offices down at Cheltenham, and he's open-minded to all this stuff. He's open-minded to this personal development stuff. How about if I put you in touch with him? So then he did, and Phil, bless his soul, the owner of these 2 offices, he got me in. He said, mate, how about we get you in and you do an hour for free if you're willing to, and teach our guys some stuff. Let's just see how they respond to your stuff. So I did, and they responded, and I was like their voice in their head saying, as I said, putting language to this haze that was going on within them. And that's how the journey began, because then through that particular network, I was introduced to many, many, many other Ray White offices, and then that evolved into, I won't list them all, but a whole bunch of other offices. So it became more about, because in the real estate space, it's very competitive on all levels. One of the competitions is for trainers. So I don't compete with other trainers, because in the real estate space, there are a lot of great sales trainers, closers, presentation skills trainers, phenomenal. And some are average, but some are phenomenal. But I don't compete against them, because that's not what I do. They get me in if, yes, they want to improve their emotional fitness, if they want to improve their resilience levels, improve their uncertainty, how they handle stress, pressure, all that kind of stuff. That's what they get me in for. So that's my specialty. And the way that this has happened has been through word of mouth over the last many, many years. So when the COVID thing hit 10, 12 weeks ago at the time of this recording, I got a phone call from one guy who still owns 4 offices and, 3 home loan centers or something. And we did a series of Zoom trainings with 71 agents on the call on a weekly basis. And it helped them immensely going through their own stuff. And so it wasn't like I marketed myself out there as a real estate trainer, because I'm not. I see myself as I said, an expert in emotional fitness. So that began all the way back from that. It started because of Bertram, that one paying client who referred me in, and then that just evolved and evolved and evolved.
I see you on social media, Joe, working with a whole range of different corporate clients and organisations and government departments, and gosh, the array is so big, because what you're sharing and what you're presenting to people it works. If you're a human being and you want to have meaning in your life, and you want to be able to always bring joy to your life regardless of the situation and circumstances, I'm guessing you're an access to that. You're a key for unlocking that, which everybody has within them. They just need a guide, and somebody to coach them through, which is what you do so very well, right?
Thank you, Barry. I appreciate that. Yeah, so everything is within us. I mean, there's a fundamental personal development 101 principle, that is that you have everything within you, right? And that is true, but not terribly useful, because if I said to George, let's just say George presented with some kind of challenge in his life, and I said, well, George, you have everything within you to solve this, rock on, you'll be fine. It's like, no, that's the whole reason why George has come to me. So my mission is to reconnect him to misplaced resources within him. So, and I don't have to be an expert in whatever the problem is that George has, because my expertise is not in the problem. My expertise is in the thinking that created the problem in the first place. And that's what I would help George or whoever with. And that's the languaging and the universal behavioral codes and patterns. Universal, they exist in all of us, these same codes and patterns. So when
Yep.
I bring those to George's attention, it's reconnecting him to misplaced resources. So he has the key to the padlock. And the key, once the padlock is really, really easy with a key, but without a key, boy, oh boy, is it hard.
But Joe, how do you know? At which point do you know your job is done? I mean, let's look at a recent example. Don't have to name names. The condition they came to you in. How did their improvement manifest itself, or how did their life-changing moment manifest itself?
Great question. So there's a couple of ways of measuring emotional fitness, and we're not talking metrically here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ways of measuring your emotional fitness is the quality of your relationships. So how people respond to you. So if your relationships, if I can speak frankly, if your relationships suck, it's feedback that it's not them, it's not her, it's not him, it's not your son, it's not whoever. It is feedback to who we are being as people.
That's a big call, Joe.
It is a big call.
A lot of people can't get their head around that.
Yeah, well, most people are emotionally unfit.
Yeah.
Because you just look at the dysfunction in their relationships. So there's two ways of measuring emotional fitness. One is the quality of your relationship. So when my clients' relationships with themselves and with others significantly improves in their genuine connection, I'll give you an example. I had a fellow from a large real estate organization come to me whenever it was, a little while ago. And he sat with me in this cafe, and he was exasperated and incredibly frustrated, to put it mildly, like to the point of tears, where he was really, really pissed off with his direct report and his EA, his executive assistant. Like he just was projecting all this stuff onto his boss and onto his EA. His EA, wasn't helpful to him. His boss is not trusting him. There's all these issues going on. So I just asked him a simple question. I said, are you married? Do you have kids? What's your life situation? And he told me that he was married with a couple of kids. I then asked him how his marriage was, and he just started to bawl his eyes out, because what he was doing was he was projecting onto his boss and onto his EA all of the unresolved issues that he hadn't taken responsibilities for in his marriage. So that whole conversation wasn't about his boss. It was about his marriage. So when we work together, when we know that the client is ready to swim on their own or whatever, it's because that relationship changes. Now, sometimes, and this is something I need to explain clearly to your listeners, is that my job is not to fix relationships or resolve relationships. It's for you. This is going to sound fluffy duck, but this is the truth. This is my truth. My mission is to help people fall back in love with themselves. So when someone falls back in love with themselves and their esteem grows and their self-confidence grows and they've got a genuine sense of certainty about them, the relationship will resolve itself. Because if that person's in the wrong relationship, it'll dissolve for good reason. And if it's and this is what I need to be clear on, is that I don't want you to think, oh, my relationship doesn't work, it's dysfunctional, so I must be emotionally unfit. No, if you've got certainty on the inside and you feel that you're making the right decision to leave that relationship, like genuinely, and you actually, as difficult as that is, and you still feel good on the inside about who you are and who you're becoming, that's emotional fitness. That's relationships giving you feedback, you see. So I didn't want to keep this in a very one-dimensional way. It's multidimensional. And in some instances, it's actually improving the relationship because, in a lot of relationships, people go missing emotionally. They become emotionally isolated even though they're physically present. And emotional fitness is about being present emotionally.
We all want genuine connection, don't we, Joe? I mean, everybody wants connection with their family, their partners, their children, their colleagues, their bosses, their clients. Everybody wants that. And how does somebody get connected to others if they're not connected to themselves? Like, how do you really have that authentic connection with others if you're not really authentically? You're trying to be a bit of that person who mentored you and a bit of that person who you look up to and a bit of that, but you're not really getting clear on who you are. At some stage, those relationships are going to break down because when what I hear and what you're saying, Joe, is when there's authenticity present, when you're authentically connected to yourself, it becomes it's so easy and it's effortless to get connected with others.
And that's a big part of my work as well, Barry, because the single most powerful force in human behavior is your identity, your self-concept, who you believe that you are. And there are in the emotional fitness work, I describe the identity phases that we go through. There's fundamentally 4 of them, and 3 of them I define as psychological identities, and there's the 4th one, which is existential identity. So, to give you a bit of a obtuse, sort of off-center kind of example, people who have managed to tap resourcefully happen to tap into their existential identity, which is the identity of consciousness, spirit, soul, call it whatever you want, quantum physical wavelength, call it whatever you want. The people who have successfully used psychedelic drugs to change their mind, it's because they've tapped into their existential identity and realized that they've never been any of the psychological roles that they've ever played. So their perception, George, their perspective has expanded beyond their psychological roles. And when people have done that, they are healed instantly of depression, anxiety, stresses, and all this sort of thing. So with my work, I take clients through the identity phases, because you have to go through these identity phases to get to the existential one. And fundamentally, because when we're in that first identity phase, we define ourselves by our body, our house, our car, our hair, our clothes, other people's opinions. We then evolve into the second identity phase, which is where we define ourselves. This is where a lot of people get themselves into trouble, where we define ourselves by our results, So whether I'm winning or losing, market leader, market second, am I making money? So when the business, or if the business struggles, their identity goes with the business. So if the business goes down the toilet, so there's their identity. Now you've got someone who's in absolute crisis. And these 2 phases of identity, which Carl Jung referred to as the athlete archetype and the warrior, the hunter, that's the centerpiece of the ambition-driven world. That's where all the anxiety and depression is. When we evolve into the 3rd stage of identity, we go into what's called the statesperson. And this statesperson now is driven by a different question, because the first phase is driven by the question, what do you think of me? Hypersensitive to other people's opinions. The second phase is defined by our results. So whether I'm winning or not defines me. And if I'm losing, boy, oh boy, am I going to be struggling psychologically big time. And then there's the 3rd phase. So the second phase, by the way, is driven by the question, what can I get? Get the girl, get the guy, get the experience, get the wealth, get the career, get the business, get the money, get the wealth. It's building. Then that evolves into the 3rd phase, which is driven by a completely different question. The 3rd phase of statesperson is, what can I give? So when the psychology of the individual, the identity phase is here, this is the doorway into meaning, that 3rd phase, which will eventually lead you to the existential identity. So when you're in this phase here, you have peace in your life. As you traverse toward the 4th stage, you have peace, because your perspective and perception, as George was saying, has completely shifted. And that's the work that I do, is I bring that to life for people. And when they tap into that, there's joy, there's a sense of peace, there's a profundity to it. It's beautiful.
Do people need psychedelics to do this, Joe?
No, you don't.
No, Joe, maybe in the 60s.
Sorry, George, I have to just say, George, so my wife and I'm 50, I just turned 50 a few weeks ago. Silvana, my wife, has turned 50 very soon. Our kids are 12, as I said. I said, when the boys get old enough, I said, you and I are going to go on a trip, if you know what I mean. And we're going to experience something different. And I don't know what it's going to be like. But I didn't want to do it now, because they're only 12, and I don't want to have this mind-altering, oh my God, I'm leaving everything now. I'm going to go and live in the mountains. I'm not ready for that yet. I'll do that later,
Well, who was the famous professor that, said, was it tune in, drop out? Ian Leary, was that his name? He was a professor of the 60s.
Bill Leary, Leary.
He only died a few years ago.
That's right.
But, he had real existential trips, and came back and wrote amazing exposés.
That's where Lennon got his lyrics from.
Right. That's right. When you tuned in,
Einstein, all these people had existential experiences.
And surprisingly, even though the modern age seems to look down on that, it's been done for thousands of years, and that's where the shaman.
It's the ego.
Correct.
It's the ego that looks down on it, because it's the ego that's threatened. Because the ego knows there's an end, whereas the existential part never ends. It's life.
Yeah.
Like C.S. Lewis said. C.S. Lewis said, you don't have a soul. You are a soul. What you have is a body.
Yeah.
So let's wake up to that.
Yeah. Well, my question to you is, I see a lot of people stuck in the second phase of
Yes.
life.
Well said, George.
And they don't shift no matter what. They seem on the face of things to be enjoying themselves immensely. But, you could see the cracks. You could see the cracks behind the mirror, that kind of thing.
They look unhealthy.
Well, here's the thing. There are indicators, aren't there? Like when you look at a person, I seem to think that I can sense it in someone that they're not, like Barry said, they're looking unhealthy. They're overweight, bags under their eyes. They're looking a little bit haggard. They're trying to hold it together. They're pretending and they're pretending and they're pretending. Everything's fine. That's it. To me, that sounds like a lot of effort to try and make someone have an epiphany who's in that condition and used to that condition.
Yeah, so George, let me be very clear here. You see, my responsibility is not to, how do I say this? I say to coaches all the time, you cannot coach anyone unless their client is committed to change. If they are committed to change, then rock on, we can work and we can make this happen and help you. But if they're...
Again, Joe, you might have the owner of a multi agency and have 71 staff, but he might be the only one committed to transformation for himself, and you're being brought in to teach 71 people who may not really hear a word you're saying.
I've got to tell you something. NBN is one of my clients, and before the COVID thing hit, the senior managers of this particular business unit. This business unit is made up predominantly of men, and they're all engineers. And they were the reason why they were really precarious and thinking, I'm not sure your message is going to land with these guys. They're engineers, Joe. They're logicians. They are left brain linear thinkers. Like you're talking about a circle, they think in lines. It's like, well, that's a whole other conversation. But it's like, yeah, okay. And the reason why they actually got me in was because the Melbourne part of NBN, I ran a day with 100 plus of their leaders on this kind of work, and they absolutely bloody raved on about how phenomenal it was for them in waking up to these different insights. So it was because they were trusting that, not trusting me, because they didn't know me, right? So they said, well, we're only getting you in because, what's his name? I won't use names. Said that there was a phenomenal cultural shift from what they learned from that day with you. So we can't see how it's going to work, but we trust him, and through him, we're trusting you, even though we don't know you. So I went and did this thing for a whole day. And this was back in February this year before the COVID thing hit. And to this day, just speaking to the managers on a Zoom call just the other day, literally last week, whenever it was, he still can't get his head around the feedback he's received from these engineers, because fundamentally, I was there teaching them how to love. So it's the languaging of it. And when the languaging of it hits the soul, George, it wakes people up. Now, did everyone there resonate deeply with the message? Probably not. But based on what did they say? The 94% rating of people in the room saying this was pragmatic, of use, mind-altering, thank you, all that kind of stuff. All it takes is for the right person in an organization to say, listen, we're going to do something different, and have a look at this. And then they just leave it to me to language all of this and spend a day with them. And it's perception shifting. So, but if the boss is not open to it, then, we don't have much hope.
and despite all that good work, Joe, you still have a dodgy internet connection.
Oh, did I cut out then?
You've froze on a couple of occasions.
Oh,
but, NBN didn't help you in that area.
No, that's right. I'm not on the NBN yet. I've got to get on it.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, you know people now. People.
I hope that message got through, my lord.
Well, George, it might be you, mate, because I could hear it fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Barry. I appreciate that support.
Okay. Joe, I guess the question is, if I'm a young bloke and I'm frustrated and my career's not going anywhere, and I certainly want more in life, but just don't have the capacity or the understanding of how to reach out and grab it. How does a young fellow come to you? Like, how do they afford you, Joe? Because you work with organizations, you've reached a pinnacle in your career. Do you have an offering for people who are just starting out in life and to coin Viktor Frankl, are in search of meaning.
Yeah. So on my website, there's a free resource, which is called the 16 Questions to Kickstart Your Emotional Fitness. These questions are designed to be thought-provoking, not in a, how do I say it? It's not in a dramatic fashion. It's to get you thinking about what matters in your life. And it's just asking some simple questions like, where are you most organized in life? Because where you are most organized in life, if you do it naturally, there's a clue there about a values theme that you really do value. I often say to people that if you're living in alignment with your values, you don't need motivation. You're already self-inspired. So they can go to the website and download. They're more than welcome to download that. And in about another 3 or 4 weeks from this time, so I dare say it'll be July 2020, I'm actually putting on there an online mini course on the identity phases, so which goes for nearly an hour in little sections, so people can start getting the language around understanding who they are and who they're becoming, most importantly. So that's going to be another resource.
That's fantastic.
In another, thank you. So they're welcome to download that. The other thing I encourage people to do is start reading some of the classics. Start reading some of the philosophers, or I started my personal development journey back in the late 90s, just reading basic things by people like, Brian Tracy and people like that. And then that work evolved, and I got into, Wayne Dyer, Greg Braden, all these different people, Eckhart Tolle, Caroline Meese. I mean, you get into all of these different people, and their language is brilliant as well. So, but if your listeners are resonating with anything that I've shared, they're welcome just to go to joepane.com.au, and it's all there.
Yeah, it's certainly that I remember in 1996 someone threw me Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah,
and I've got to say, it took me down a rabbit warren of amazing discoveries, and it is certainly a life-changing moment to pick up one of those books and just absorb maybe 2 or 3 golden nuggets, and it just opens up your mind. It's incredible. And on that note, for those people who are hard pressed to read a lot of books because they're under the pump and just trying to bring in a living, I take it that the best distillation of everything that we've spoken about is your online course, right?
Well, there's an online course, but I'm going to also say, George, that we will always make time for the things that matter to us, right?
That's true.
And, I was out running this morning in freaking 2-degree temperature at 5:50 a.m. for the warm-up with my running group, so I can get through my routine, so I could get to my, my daily commitments and stuff. So, and believe you me, at 4:50 a.m., boy, was it hard to get out of bed when it was freezing, like really, really freezing. So we all will make way for time. We'll make time and make the space for the things that truly matter. My online program, the Emotional Fitness Formula, which is the full version, that's going to be available later on in July. But as I said, the free online version, the smaller, the mini version of that, which will be released next month, I trust and hope. I'll put that together in the trust and hope that it'll be one of those things that will get someone thinking, oh my Lord, I never thought of it like that before. It causes them to shift their perception around something. That's the intention of it anyway. So hopefully people will get value from there.
Barry, any more questions for Joe?
No, I think it's just I'm really grateful for your time, Joe, and sharing what you have. I think a lot of people will be having light bulb moments, going, there's something else, even not necessarily having the moment now, but going, hey, there's something else available for me, and if I really want meaning in my life, it's available by being in communication, and it starts with getting in touch with someone like yourself, Joe, and just having that conversation and discovering what's there, or going to your website. And like George said before, with the book Think and Grow Rich, and any book that we're given and we read, it can take us down a complete rabbit hole and of new information and a whole new way of living and being. And it makes such an impact. Like, it's very hard to do it on your own. Like I've spent 22 years of my life, Joe, been stuck in self-development and personal development books, and it's it's always been so much more powerful by being in communication with somebody. Like, we've been friends for many years now. The conversations that we have are amazing, and being in communication with someone like yourself, it just gives people that access to discover what's available. And no amount of books, you can't learn this stuff in books. Like, you can get access and insights, but the real breakthroughs are actually by being in communication with experts like yourself, Joe, and being surrounded by, I'm sure, even in your online platform, you've got a way for people to communicate together that brings them together. Is that right?
Yeah, that's going to be part of the full program when that's available. There'll be a dedicated online closed-off community.
It's great.
I was going to also share with you that when they go to the website, so joepane.com.au, there's also a link to the podcast, which is obviously a free resource. And that podcast is short, sharp, 15 to 20 minutes insights. It's called Insights with Joe Pane. The link is on the website anyway. And on there are insights into, the philosophy of knowing when to quit something, the understanding of boundaries and how do you create those. They're just everyday, pragmatic, implementable insights into living an emotionally fit life.
Beautiful.
Joe, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for sharing your insights, Joe, and the wonderful work that you're doing. As Barry said, the key to any listener or viewer of this podcast who feels alone, isolated, and disconnected, he's getting into communication with someone like yourself. So well done, Joe. Well done. I'm actually going to be one of your first respondents when you put that course online. I'd love to see your work and even be part of it if I can.
Thank you, George.
Generally highly recommend you, Joe. And fantastic. What can I say? Thank you for your time.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on board, George. Thank you, Barry, for organising this. It's deeply appreciated.
Oh, it's great. Thanks for sharing. So it's such an honour to be able to share this with the community. And ultimately, what we're all about is connecting communities. And you've mentioned it before at the end of this around love. What you're really doing is showing people how to love, and not love in that unusual love, in a way of just
fall back in love with themselves.
The way they're being, exactly, just being in love with everything around them. And I'm all for that. That's what we're about, connecting communities globally. And so appreciative that you're in this space and you're being of service, and you're making yourself available to people, Joe, because more people like you will have our world just make what's available for everybody. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for your kind words.
See you later, Joe. Take care, mate. Take care.
Bye for now.
Cheers, mate.